doing today. Okay, so I tend to keep these really informal, so please do feel free to turn on your mics and stop, especially with a group this small. It would be, you know, not a problem at all for you to interrupt me and ask questions as we're going. So please feel free to do that. This is a basic orientation for teaching with OLI, you know, an introduction to the platform and how to use it. And here are the kinds of things that we're going to cover. So we'll talk about how you access the course, you and your students, what the syllabus will look like, and then you know, give a course overview. We'll talk about the gradebook where your students' scores are recorded, and the learning dashboard where you can see the progress of their learning. So where a gradebook would be more like performance scores, a learning dashboard would be what we like to call a learning estimate, so that you can tell how students are doing against the learning objectives in the course. And then finally, we'll finish up with setting up and configuring courses so that you can get up and running with your students. But that's it for the PowerPoint. The rest of it is just actual demonstration. So let's go ahead and jump in. This is the syllabus page for a course. It's where you and your students will first jump into a course. But let's back up and talk about how to actually get here. So I'm signed in as an instructor. What I will do is you'll note that this has a course key, and this is how your students would access. Actually, it's one of two methods for how your students would access an OLI course. If you're delivering on the web without providing single sign-on in your LMS, then they would use the course key, and I'll demonstrate that now. So when you configure your course, you choose the course key. It's a unique identifier that you assign when you're giving it a title and dates and things of that nature. And then what you do is you give this course key to your students, and they will go to oli.cmu.edu/course key. And there, they simply enter the course key, and what it does is usher them through the process of registering in your course. So they'll enter the, you know, they're notified just so that you can, you know, they get a little bit of information about what the course is that they're signing up for and who the instructors are and what the dates are for the course. And then if they don't already have an account, then they sign up for one. And if they already have one, then they can simply sign in. Let's go through that real quickly, and you can see what it looks like. I'm actually going to have to create a different account ID because this one I already have. And in this case, it's, oh wow, the formatting is off, but oh, it recognized that I have a CMU address. So let me, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Let me, I have to use my Gmail address because it wants me to sign in as a CMU student because we have single sign-on. So this is my personal account. it will recognize that I have already used that email address, and does it do, it's asking me if I want to look up the account that that's associated with. But that's not what I want to do. I want to actually create my new account. And so here's the online consent form where you agree or disagree to have your data used in an anonymous fashion for learning science research. And then this is it. You are registered. And here I am on my course page where I can enter the course. I can go to my scores, or I can do a system check. System check is really just it's really just a list now. All you have to do is have an up-to-date browser, and you've passed the system requirements. So when you enter the course, you'll see that syllabus page that we were talking about. This is the gateway to your course as a student and as an instructor. You'll see that everything is laid out in a unit and module fashion. The high-level assignments like quizzes and checkpoints are going to be listed here, and if the instructor has created any schedule, that will be listed here as well. At this point, there are no dates assigned. So we use just this unit and module structure on the syllabus page because it would get too unwieldy if we had the full course contents here page by page. So if you jump into a module, then you get the pages. What you have this is a sort of intro to the module where the learning objectives are all listed along with all of the pages that you'll find in the module. The typical OLI page is going to be one or more learning objectives at the top, followed by some immediate instruction, and then the instruction can be any form. It can be movies, it can be images, tables, etc. This one is an interactive example where the student is walking through a worked example, and then you're immediately putting it into practice. This is the OLI approach, is to not have content in one area and practice in another and maybe lectures in a third, but rather everything embedded and in a linear inline fashion. So you can see that as soon as you've learned a piece of content, you're going to go ahead and put it into practice. The second, along with learning practicing early and often, another component of a course is having this immediate targeted feedback. So each of these questions is designed with a not one correct answer and then 3 throwaway answers. Instead, the answers are designed to represent common misunderstandings at this point. So the author here recognizes that if a student was to invert the molar ratio of carbon monoxide to iron, that this would be the result of the calculation, and therefore the remediation is part of the actual feedback. So the students can click through and do all the practice, and what you'll see is that often we'll give some reinforcement to the correct answers, and that's because if students are guessing, then they might not know why they got it right. So it helps to provide information about why an answer is right. So so far we've had a lot of that's been a lot. I wanted to pause and see if anybody has any questions, especially because this is such a small group. It's so easy to do that. Okay, thank you, Owen. Okay, so this is, I know that it sounds pretty basic, but this is the approach to an OLI course. It's really just letting students know up front what the learning objectives are. Those learning objectives are going to be, they're going to be formatted in a student-centered, measurable way. So you'll find that this speaks directly to the student and the expectations that you have of them. It'll talk about the things that they're expected to do, the things that they're expected to be able to do, the things that they can expect to learn. And they're worded in a way that typically will have action verbs that allow you to design exercises that let the students demonstrate mastery of these learning objectives. So here we have apply stoichiometric relationships, calculate amounts of substances. These are things that allow you, the design of the learning objective enables you to design the practice so that you can measure whether students are actually meeting them. We start with our student-centered measurable learning objectives. We practice early and often. We provide immediate feedback in those interactions, and behind the scenes in all of these interactions, we have skill tagged all of these materials. So every question is skill tagged with the skill or multiple skills that this question is assessing. And what that does is it lets us paint a picture over time. The more questions on these skills that they encounter, it lets us paint a picture of what they are struggling with and what they're mastering. So we'll get to that in a moment, but I wanted to show you just the basics of what the student experience is like. They can move page to page using the navigation arrows. This is our newer theme called Chaperone. The older theme will have it will have navigation buttons at the top and the bottom of the page. And then here's a PhET chemistry simulation that we can embed external resources into the course as well. And sorry about the talking there. I'm sharing this space with my wife. She's also working down here. Okay, so boy, this is a long page. I wanted to show you that each module is going to, here you can see the page structure of each module, and then at the end of each module we've got at least in chemistry we've got labs in most modules, but then we have a module summary and a quiz, and it is these quizzes where the scores are going to appear in the gradebook. So we have generally two exercises at the end of every module. The My Response activity is a metacognitive sort of prompt for the student to take stock in their own understanding. And when they click on it, what they're presented with is a Likert scale for all of the learning objectives in the module. And then they're asked to determine their ability to perform those tasks, these learning objectives, with or without support. And what this does is it enables them to sort of get a better understanding of what their learning state is. So if they're realizing that they're not able to perform these tasks without help, then they're not ready to move on to the assessment, most likely. They can either seek help or go back and work through the material more. It also gives them the opportunity to ask the instructor questions. So what is least clear to you at this point, and what other questions do you have for your instructor? And then these are all aggregated for the class and presented to you in the learning dashboard, so that you can see how the class is self-assessing their own abilities. But also you can see the questions that they're asking you guys. And I will show that to you when we get to the learning dashboard. The quiz itself is pretty straightforward. You click on it and it will open in a new window. And I'm sorry, because I'm in here as a student. The quiz is not available. Normally, I don't go through the whole process of signing up as a student, and I'm able to access it because I'm the teacher. So why don't I go ahead and sign in as myself, and we'll take a look at that. All right, so let's see if we can just jump back to it. Okay, so now I'm here as the instructor. This is what you would see if it were available to you as a student. It would look identical to this, except that you wouldn't have the ability to update the settings or the schedule as a student, of course. So you can go ahead and start your attempt. And you know, you have this one is designed for, you know, where you're going to fill in a chemical equation. In this case, you've got multiple choice, more multiple choice. This is multiple choice from a pull down menu. This one is just traditional multiple choice. And then you get to the end of the quiz and you submit it. And you'll note that the confirmation is never in the same place as the submit. So that means that students can't accidentally submit the assessment because the window is never in the same place. You can't accidentally double click. You have to intentionally submit your quiz, and then you get your summary. And whether they can review the attempt, whether they can take multiple attempts, what the scoring method is. These are all things that are available to you in your configuration. You can choose different scoring, such as average or highest or last. You can choose whether you want to give multiple attempts, etc. That's all available to you. So let's take a look quickly. Actually, why don't I stop? Do we have any questions? Okay. That's either a good sign or a really bad sign. Hopefully a good sign. Okay. All right, so let's jump into the gradebook, which you can access here up in the menu or on the Manage Course page, which is here. The Manage Course page is also accessible from your My Courses page if you're teaching multiple courses, which is common. So this is what the gradebook looks like. Everything has two views. It has a collapsed view, and it has an expanded view. And right now we're looking at the collapsed view for everything except for module 13. And the reason that module 13 is expanded is, you know what, I'm not sure. Generally, it's because that's where the most work has been done recently, but I'm not certain of that today. Maybe that is where the last student work was done. When you click these arrows, you can expand and collapse. The collapsed view is going to give you just an at-a-glance idea of where the work is being done. It's not meant to give you a strict numerical percentage of completed work, just gives you an idea of who is doing the work and where it's being done. If you expand the student view, then you can get a little bit more of you have better fidelity over your estimate, but it's really just an estimate. If there is a gray bar, that means that there's nothing to actually do there. It's just, there's nothing interactive. It doesn't mean that there's no learning happening. It just means that there's nothing for us to record the students having done. Generally, these are introductory modules. For instance, you see that module 7 is the first one in unit 2. It's probably just 1 or 2 pages of introductory material. When you expand, then what you get is a view of the work that was available and what their scores are. So this one doesn't have anything good in it. Let's see where we can find one with a score. So looks like Erin Serwinski got a 27% when she walked through her chemical equations. I don't think that the author who walked through this did not do any of the assessments. She just did. She just walked through and worked her way through the practice assignments, which is why we're not seeing many scores. But Erin, who happens to be one of my coworkers, did this so that we would have a score here. So when you expand the student view, then what you get are a list of all of their relevant information, their attempt scores, their statuses, the due dates, when they started and when they finished. The lower level is each of the individual attempts, and if you want to click on them, then you can see what the records were in those. And the higher of the lines is actually the score of record. So in this case, it was either the scoring method was probably either maximum or last, which is why it's identical. If it were average, then we would see it was a 14%. And when you click on it, then you get to review the student's attempts, and you can override anything that you want. You can override the overall score, or you can override individual answers. Like if you think that there's a flaw and everybody should have that answer, the score for that answer, then you can override it. But this is where you essentially see what everybody's answers were if you need to review them. Okay. Any questions about this so far?
Hi, Hal. Yes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using it for independent learning for years, and I'd like to turn it into this classroom. Obviously, in COVID, I want them to go over it before the lecture. How do I add a second instructor, and how do I add students to it? Because I have it up on my other computer, but it's blank.
Okay. So the ability to add instructors is actually not something that you can do. You would have to use the help link and in your course, and let us know the person who you want to have added. That person has to have an account already. So please ask that person to create an account first, and then we can add them as an instructor. The way to add students is by either, I guess if you've been using it as independent, does that mean that you've been using the open and free version?
Exactly.
Okay. So in that case, what you need to do is, if you don't already have an instructor account, then you need to create one, or write to the support folks who will help you with adding instructor privileges to your account. Because
as it stands, I'm not sure. I had one when I started this in 2016.
Okay.
And I honestly don't know if I have, so I'll get in touch with, like you say,
Okay. Yeah, the way that you would know is if when you sign in on your My Courses page, if there's a link at the top that states create a new course, top left. If you have a link that says create a new course, then you have instructor privileges. Otherwise, you don't.
Okay, I'll have a look.
And then, so having instructor privileges allows you to use the course builder tool, which is essentially a configurator. You set up you choose the topic that you're teaching in, and you can reorient the content if you need to. You can change the assessment settings, etc. And then part of that process is assigning a course key. So when you make you're typing out the title of your course and what the start and the end dates are. One of those things is the course key. It's 4 to 12 alphanumeric digits, and then you give that to your students, and they go through that process that I showed you at the beginning.
That works.
Okay.
And then, do they have to pay $25 or something? Is that the
Generally, yeah. There are still some that are that are still on grant funding, and we have not flipped them over to paid, but we've moved out of grant funding into sustainability mode. So we are slowly flipping the bit on all of those, and they will all be $25 relatively soon, or less. I mean, there are one or two that are more. Those are proprietary, like healthcare informatics is one that's actually, like, that wasn't produced by OLI. It was produced externally, and it's delivered via OLI, so they control the pricing. Logic and proofs is another one, but everything else is either $25, $20, or less for smaller courses.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, sure. In the gradebook, you'll see. Oh yeah, go ahead, Paula.
I'm sorry. So I have been using the informatics program that you were just talking about for my students, and I have a couple of questions because I do have them paying the full $65 so they can do the whole course and get their certificate and so on and so forth. Okay. I only assign them so many modules. They don't do the entire, because it's so much during the course. So my questions are this. I've gone through the syllabus and I've assigned the due dates for the quizzes that I will actually count for the course. In my grade book, of course, all however many 16 modules show up. Is there a way that from my gradebook I can hide the modules that are the quizzes that are not assigned? I don't want to take them out of the course because I want them to have access to this after the course is over since they paid for it. Is there a way to do that? Or they're just in there anyway?
There is not a way to do that if they already exist in the course. So when you set up a course, you can omit material, but you can't omit material after it's already been built because of that skill mapping that happens in the background where everything is skill tagged. There's no way once a course has been instantiated to actually remove content from it. But in the gradebook, there is no way to hide anything that already exists, even if it's like not scheduled. Is the goal that you simply don't want to see it here in the gradebook when you visit because they don't need to do it?
Well, yeah, and I guess that the gradebook's probably secondary. What I didn't want them to get confused about is, you know, if you had 16 modules, and let's say that I assign 9 of them throughout the course, because they have to do 2. I don't want them to go in and spend time on a module that they really didn't need to, and then they get to the end of it and say, oh gosh, I didn't even have to do this. I would hope they would look at those with dates. I didn't hide material because I wanted them to have access to everything after the course is over, because this is a prep for a national certification. So that's why I didn't hide anything. So I guess what I'm understanding is the only thing I can really do is just reinforce with them, only pay attention to those that have dates. There's no other way really to do that.
Well, that's definitely the best place to start is really just, and I don't mean to sound like I'm passing the buck, but yeah, good communication is the best first step. But if you are concerned about them, like if it's more of a risk for them to actually waste time during the semester on material that that you want them to have after the semester, what you can do is you can actually schedule it. Like you can close a unit via schedule by only allowing it to be open in the future, but then that puts the onus back on you to remember at the end of the term to release those.
So what if I scheduled them for the day after the term ended? Would they automatically open then? Students would have access?
Yep, that would work.
Maybe that's what I would do. I mean, you would hope, you'd hope that they wouldn't do unnecessarily work, but I wanted to make it easy for them because, like I said, I'm not assigning all of it.
Yeah, I guess you're balancing here the risk that they would do work that isn't assigned and sort of spend time on that, even though it's valuable. They would be spending time on it when it didn't apply to the class.
Right. You're
balancing that with the fact that, I don't know, maybe they're fast enough and they really can handle that. And you don't want to block them. So I guess it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Pick your poison.
Well, okay. I think that's what I'll do. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something, that there was a way to do that. Again, I want this. The last question is, since we're talking about the assessments, when you go in and manage your assessments, will you have the option of change assessment? I'm a little confused the difference between the option of reviewing. When do you give them the chance to review, and when do they get the feedback? Because I give them more than one chance to make a certain grade, and I don't want them to have feedback too soon, and I want to make sure my settings are correct.
Okay, so in that case, the setting that you want is, I'll show you. Where is the managed course? Oh, this is still a student page, so I have to refresh. Okay, so we'll go to manage course, and over here we'll check the assessment options. Now these are the global options. You can go in and set this globally and then change individual ones if you need to. But what you're describing is feedback mode, and you want to choose after the deadline passes, so that if they have 3 attempts before the deadline then they don't get the feedback about which ones were right and which ones were wrong in attempts 1 and 2, to help them with attempt 3 until after the deadline has passed. What they do get is a score, but they don't get to know which ones were right and which ones were wrong.
And what is the review answers below, allowed and not allowed? How does that relate to feedback?
Yeah, this one has to do with permit students to review their answers prior to seeing feedback. I believe that this has to do. No, I don't know. You know what? It's been a long. No, it's been a long time, and I'm not sure I understand that description. I believe that this means that you prevent them from even seeing what their selections were. So when you submit as a student, you can then review your assessment, and reviewing it permits you to see what you answered and whether it was right or wrong. And if you do not allow them to review their answers, then either they don't get to see the assessment at all in a review mode, or they get to see the assessment but not see which answers they selected. I think it's actually the former, that they can't review their submission.
So basically they can't go back and change their answer, like, oh gosh, I didn't mean to answer that.
No, I mean after submission. So it's still before the due date. You finish your first one and you submit it. At that point, you know what your score is. There's no way to not have it score. But if review answers is not allowed, they can't go back now that they have submitted it and look at what their answers were specifically.
Okay.
This one, internal navigation, is the one that sort of relates to what you just asked, which is the ability, especially if it's paginated, to go back and forth and see what you have done before submission. Generally, nobody restricts that usually.
Yeah, I don't even have that option on mine. The last thing I have is review answers. I don't have any of that stuff below that on this course.
Interesting, huh? That's interesting, and I don't know how to explain that.
That's okay.
It may simply be that there is no. It's probably that there are no hints and that there are no pagination, no assessments with pagination, and therefore the option just simply doesn't appear.
Okay. All right.
Just a guess.
Okay.
All right. So now we've seen the gradebook and we've seen the course itself. So let's go to the learning dashboard. The learning dashboard is where you will see a listing of, here, let me blow this up a little bit. You'll see a listing of all of the learning objectives in your module. It's always by module. When you jump into the learning dashboard from the generic link, you will be dropped into the module with the most recent and most work by your students. So just, meant to make it easy for you to get to the place that they're most likely to be working in. So this week, you would see what they've been working on, module 14 in this case. We have this presentation of a bar chart for their estimated learning level. And when you click the details, you get much more information. So each of these buckets is representative of how many students fall into these categories. And these are essentially our prediction that given a new question on this subject, they would be successful. So the students in the red are struggling. Students with a moderate learning estimate are, still coming along. And those with a high learning estimate, we predict would be successful if they had another question on this learning objective. The gray means that they haven't done enough work yet to generate any kind of calculation. When you click on the bucket, you get to see who's in it. and you can email them en masse if you need to, and you can see that they have or have not done any work yet. And over here, you see the skills that are associated with this learning objective. So this learning objective has these 5 skills, and they can be wordy, so we don't type them out entirely. You can get the full wording by hovering over it, as you see, and you get to see how many of the students have worked on, have answered questions that have this this skill associated with it. And then when you click on it, then you get to see a breakdown of how the questions are being answered by students. In this case, these are all the activities in the module for this learning objective, and the ones in yellow in particular have questions that assess the skill that you clicked on earlier. So now you can see what the questions are in this assessment and how students are answering them, and we present them in order of struggle. So question 1 and question 2 are the questions that the students are struggling with the most. So you could use this as a cue for what to focus on with them. You know, it gives you an idea of where to put your your expertise, where it needs to be applied, because there are a lot of questions, and knowing where they're struggling the most, you know, gives you some pretty keen insight into how they're performing and where you can be most effective in your remediation. If you come back to the main view, you'll see that we have this presentation for all the learning objectives in every module. But then down here, we've got other forms of information for you. We have a participation report, which is relatively basic. It's just the students in the course and how many of the activities that they've done. If you were to export this, you actually get a little bit more data. It will separate those participation metrics out into low stakes participation and all activities, just to give you an idea of how that's breaking down. And then the My Response report is what I mentioned earlier. This is really powerful, where you can, like I said, the person who walked through this did not do it with every student, but you can see a report of how your students as a group are answering these questions on the Likert scale. And then down here, you get their responses to those open-ended questions. But one of the really cool things here is that you can choose to hide the student names and then share this with your class. And we haven't done any dedicated research on this, but we have some really good anecdotal evidence that this is a powerful tool for classes. It gives students a sense of a little bit of control over the class. They see that their contributions are having an effect on the instruction and the activities that the class is taking together. You know, a lot of the time, you know, a teacher will put this up on the screen and talk about it in lecture, or they will be used for conversation starters in a discussion forum, things of that nature. But it also gives the students the ability to see that, like, it gives them insight into what their peers are struggling with, which is really helpful to them. It helps them. They tend to come forward more as the class progresses and share more and more about what they are struggling with, so that it's more likely to be discussed as a group. So I do encourage you to use this as much as you can. We have really good feedback from instructors about its usefulness. And then you get a report on the checkpoints and the quizzes. Like I said, she didn't walk through this one, but you'll be able to see how the questions broke down on the on the assessments, you know, which questions were the most troublesome to students and how they answered, and you get rates of answers. So, you know, if question 1 was answered incorrectly the most, you get to see what the rate was for each of the selections, and then address that with your students. Any questions about this? All right. So it's powerful. The learning dashboard is really powerful, but it's also really it's pretty stripped down. We don't want it to be an overwhelming, you know, control board of knobs and levers that just never gets used. Instead, it really just focuses in on helping you identify where, you know, your expertise is most needed. That's really what you should think of the learning dashboard as a tool to help you with. So let's go ahead and take a look at the course setup process. As an instructor, when you sign in, here's that create a new course link, Owen, that I mentioned earlier. Now I'm signed in as an admin, so there are going to be a few. Actually, you know what? Why don't we just do this? Why don't I sign in with my instructor account, and we'll get the clean view. Okay, so this is my you know, instructor demo account, and when I click create a new course, we have simple mode and we have advanced mode. Advanced mode is only necessary for 2 tasks, and those are omitting material and moving a module between units. Those 2 tasks you cannot undertake after a course has been configured and built, but everything else that the course builder would permit you to do is something that you can do after the fact. So if you don't need to omit anything, then I encourage you to just use simple mode because it's really quick, and then you can go back and change anything you need to from the defaults after your course is set up. So I'm gonna demonstrate simple mode real quick. You will choose a curriculum when this loads. It takes a moment because we've got several hundred loaded in the system, and it's checking my permissions on all of them. They all have, they can either be public or private to a particular group, and so it's checking all my permissions. And we will choose something small that builds relatively quickly, like argument diagramming. If you choose a piece of content from that list that has more options, they would appear here with radio buttons. So for instance, statistics, you can choose, we have several different flavors of statistics, and we have several different default sets of instructions that are published with it based on the piece of statistical evaluation software that you want to use, that you want your students to use, like Excel or R or StatTutor, and it would default to one based on your selection here. But argument diagramming only has one option, so there's nothing to select. We're going to start with our start and end dates. And the time zone is important, of course, because it helps control the due dates for anything that you assign for your students, or the open and close dates for content. We'll put in a title and my institution. I encourage you here to type out the full institution name to help us identify your school more easily if we need to. Course key is entered by you. It is just a random, or I should say it's a string of 4 to 12 digits, and it's alphanumeric. And I believe that the hyphen and the underscore, maybe, I don't even know if underscore is permitted. Hyphen, I think, is the only piece of the only character you can enter that isn't a letter or a number. So we'll call it a KC demo, course key. Password, I would recommend you not use, because the course key itself acts as the as the password. If you have a good reason for using a password, then by all means go ahead. But it's really just another hurdle for students, and we want to minimize the likelihood of them encountering any issues. Auto admit students is also usually the default, because otherwise they're embargoed and you have to manually accept each one, and then you just confirm what you're going to be, what you've entered, and click finish, and that's it. So now at this point the course has been created with the default set of content and no schedule, and that's it. And if you wanted to go in and change the schedule, you would visit the syllabus page, and anything that could be scheduled would be clickable here. Any I should say activity that can be scheduled. If you want to schedule your content, then what you're going to do is you're going to use these settings over here. In this case, it's schedule course materials. This basic schedule doesn't need to be changed, but on the next page you have the ability to open or close any of the units and modules, and those will be the overriding dates for anything. So just remember that if you schedule something inside of a module, but then you also close the module, then that schedule on the lab will never be applicable. It has to be open in order for that schedule to be applicable. Let's go back and take a look at the assessments options. So like I said, these are the global options, and then each one can be individually changed through an override. But you can change the number of attempts. Here's where the scoring model is. Remember I mentioned maximum and last were what might have been used on that one that we saw in the gradebook. Password, again, I wouldn't recommend using a password unless it's required. There are cases where it really does make sense, especially when you have an exception for a student who might have who might need to take it in a proctored setting, for example. That's a really good place to use a password. We have folks who deliver to several hundred students at a time in an emporium model where they're all at computer clusters, and there are TAs who are monitoring everybody around the room, and they deliver different passwords to different clusters to keep people from starting at the same time and back in the corner and being able to see each other's answers. So there are reasons to have passwords, but generally you don't want to present any student hurdles if you don't need to. Late submission, what should happen on a late submission? Generally auto submit is what we recommend, which means that at the last moment it will submit whatever work has been done, so that the student cannot get into a state of being locked out, and that would take into account both the due date and the time limit and the grace period, and give them the last, it would submit it at the last moment. Whether a late start is allowed, whether you're going to give them a grace period, whether there is a time limit, and then I see what you were saying earlier, Paula. I don't have those other options here. It must be because there's nothing there's nothing applicable for those in this course. But here we have feedback mode and review answers. So, any questions about how these work? Okay. I demonstrated earlier the way to get your students started if you're delivering on the web, where with a course key and a sign-in with a password. But we also have the ability to deliver via single sign-on in your learning management system. And I believe, yeah, see, I have a sandbox course here in Carnegie Mellon's instance of Canvas. and I'm signed in as a student at the moment. And when I sign in, I see Hal's Canvas Sandbox as a class. And when I enter the class, then there generally this is similar in all learning management systems, but in Canvas, modules are the place where single sign-on links to external tools are provided. And this home view, I guess, is showing me, the modules, because I haven't done any assignments or anything. But I have, in this case, I have links to two different OLI servers. One of them is the community server. It's like our secondary server, and then this is our main one. And when you click the main link, it prompts you to open it in a new tab, and that's what happens. You can see that I've got now 2 tabs, and this is the view for a student who has single sign-on access. So they've got this syllabus, resume where you left off, system check, which again is really just a list of information telling them to keep their browser up to date, and their scores, which is a one listing gradebook. And when you click on syllabus, it looks the same as the syllabus that you saw before. It's just, nothing is different about this. The presentation of the material for a single sign-on student versus a web sign-in student, except for the fact that the way that this works is that they didn't create their account, so they don't have necessarily control over like resetting a password. There's no password. The password is part of the single sign-on experience. But this is it. It's pretty simple, so that there's nowhere to get lost. Once they're in the course, they're in the course. But this is how the OLI environment is designed. It's all encapsulating. So it is essentially like a digital book that's interactive, and all the material is here, and all the material is accessible unless it is restricted by you. There's no deep linking, for instance. You can't, here in Canvas, create a link to different tests, at least not easily. So we recommend not doing that because it requires an authentication to get back in. If it's been a week since they were here, then that putting a deep link means that they won't be able to access it. So please don't use deep links. But that's it's a pretty basic experience for single sign-ons, but they're mutually exclusive. If you're going to have a course that is one, then students cannot access the other way, because then that would result in multiple accounts and multiple sets of data and lots of confusion about how to access their material and where data is missing. Like, I know I took this test, why is the score not in my gradebook? Well, it's because it would be because you accessed with a different account, and we don't want that to happen. So they're mutually exclusive. Any further questions? We've pretty much gone over all of the basics.
I'd just like to say how while you were talking, I was able to get my instructor status. That's how quick it is. That's
fantastic. It isn't always.
So I'm actually building my course as you speak. It's brilliant.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, the woman who monitors our support email queue, Kim, she's really fantastic.
She's a legend.
And yeah, she's on top of it. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, so I would recommend, when you are in a course and you do need support, to use this help link, because it gives us contextual data about, or metadata about who you are and where you are, especially if you've been on a page. Like, if you're on a page and you have a question about, a typo or an image not appearing, and click the help link up here, it tells us exactly where you are and lets us cut out a lot of the back and forth question and answer about what the problem might be. So just wanted to recommend that. and we do offer support to students as well. So, you know, that can help deflect a lot of the work for you. Any other questions? We're nearly to the end of time here.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Happy to do this. Thank you for joining. I do appreciate it. Okay, well, then I think we'll end 2 minutes early. Everybody can go make the most of their 2 minutes, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all. I really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much.
Is it possible to have access to the recording?
Yes, I will. It'll take a little while to process, and then I will upload it to YouTube, and I'll share the link with you guys.
Super.
Super.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.